Thanks, George. You guys don't know that you should not applaud for a speaker ever until you've heard them to find out if they're any good or not. Yeah, I was just going to turn that down. Awesome. Perfect. Well, good morning. You know, one thing I really like about coming stateside, if I do that in Canada, nobody says anything. You guys at least respond. So that's good, because I really am a feedback speaker. And if you guys all sit there like bumps on a log, I'm going to be bored to tears. So please, if you have questions, if you want to talk about something different, if I'm talking too long about a slide, just kick me in the butt, ask me a question, do whatever, and we'll get moving on. By the way, you do know that it's Pierre, South Dakota, not Pierre, South Dakota, right? Like, I just don't get this. My name's Peter, and in French that's Pierre, and that's exactly how it's spelled. So I heard that on the radio. I didn't know that's how you guys pronounced it. I heard that on the radio, and I said, what the heck are they talking about? Pierre. Where? I figured it out. Anyway, this is my contact info. If you want to get a hold of me, please, like, you can take a picture, go to my Twitter homepage, all my contact info is there. I really do live on feedback. If I say something you don't like and you don't want to tackle me in public, that's fine. Just send me an email, send me a text, whatever. But I really am, I just love that feedback. Whoa. Where are we getting that feedback from? Yeah. So I need to stand back here. Is that what? That's okay. We'll stand back here. Sorry about that. Cool. So just 1 minute of shameless self-promotion. I do work with an organization called Real Agriculture, and I do a weekly podcast there. You can get it off the website. It's called Wheat Pete's Word. The beauty of that podcast, if you do listen, is that you can ask questions. If you ask questions, I'll answer them. You'll get my opinion of what the answer is on the following week's episode. And you can say, well, what does a guy from Ontario know about South Dakota? And it's absolutely a fair question, but I will tell you that I understand the principles of agronomy, and I'm a wheat guy for the most part, but I'm an agronomist. So I come from Ontario. Corn is king. Soybeans are queen. I'm still getting feedback. Is that? Anyway, I apologize, but corn is king, soybeans are queen. Wheat is the runt pig. It really is where I come from. And so I'll talk anything agronomy, whoa. Hopefully we get that fixed. Oh yeah, I can't walk ahead, right? Yeah, what's that? Yeah, exactly. Go and say, no, anyway, I'm a wanderer when I walk, so that's a bad thing. So there's a few things other than the podcast, though, that we do. We do Sirius Satellite Radio 147. How many people Sirius Satellite Radio listeners? Oh, come on, this is the land of no signal. Like, surely you guys listen to Sirius Satellite, and that's rural radio, right? That's agriculture 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you want to know about Canadian agriculture, from we're from 3:30 to 4:30 Central Standard Time is always Canadian agriculture. That's Real Ag Radio. And if you listen Thursdays, I'm not on Thursdays, I'm on Agronomy Mondays, but Thursdays is really cool because they go across Canada and they interview farmers. And so you want to know what's going on in Canadian agriculture, you can listen there and catch up. Not that you guys care a lot, but it is kind of cool. We do a few other things. We have a school series up there. There's over 400 wheat school episodes up there now. And so we just interview the best experts from around the globe. You can go there and you can listen to Eric Watson, who is the previous world record holder wheat. Anybody know how much wheat yield he got? Do you know what the world record wheat is right now? Tim Lammerman out of the UK, 267.7 bushels per acre. Eric Watson got 258.8, and it was Tim that took him out. So you can listen to, how did he do that, those kind of things. It's kind kind of pretty cool. And then we also now do the agronomists on Monday night. So last Monday night was on canola. If you're a canola grower, there's just lots of good stuff from that perspective. All right, let's go. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. And I really think that, you know, if you never grew up on a farm and you come to a farm, you have no clue what works. And because you have no clue what works, you really open your mind to all the possibilities. The problem is that everybody in this room, or almost everybody in this room, has farmed for their entire career. And because you've farmed for your entire career, you don't think there's many options, right? The expert, they think they know the answer. And so what I'd really like you to do to start with is, you know, every time you go to the field, I want you to just kind of rethink what you're doing, because there maybe is a better way. And so I give this talk, or I talk to students at university from time to time, and I like this saying from Shunryu Suzuki, but that always leads me here. So what are the most dangerous words in agriculture? Exactly. We've always done it this way. And when I put that up for the kids at school, you know what they say? Oh yeah, Grandpa, he won't let me do nothing. My dad's the biggest stick in the mud there ever was. And I really do want you to, like, you go to the field to cultivate your no-till. And by the way, I grew up as Peter No-Till. Before I was Wheat Pete, I was Peter No-Till, so I'm a no-till guy. But when you go to the field, always ask yourself why. And if you can't answer the why, maybe there is a better way. And so just have those kind of open thought processes. All right. So I did a presentation in back home in Ontario a little while ago with another producer, and this was the producer, his first slide. I'm from Elgin County, that's a county in Ontario, and I'm a die-hard ground beater. Like, farmers in Ontario, they want to work the ground. And, you know, you kind of go like, why? Well, it's the residue, and we'll talk about residue further on in the presentation, but it's just, we like to see that brown dirt. Now, you guys aren't like that. That's a good thing. So you're more, you're no-till farmers. I think that's awesome. You look at this and you say, why would somebody do this? And I'll show you why people do this. Because you guys are all die-hard testosterone farmers. And you like to see the black smoke pour. And as long as you like to see black smoke pour, I mean, nothing makes black smoke pour more than tillage, right? A little bit of power hop there, right? E-hop. It's the 2010 World Speed Plowing Championship. Yeah, they do like it. And that guy over there, he's having a little bit of trouble. He actually burns out after a while. But yeah, you guys all like to see black smoke. And that's, you've got to get over that thought process. All right, enough of that. So I'm going to start on a little bit different tact. And because I think it's really important. And we don't always give ourselves enough credit or even understand how significant things are that we do. All right? And so how much pressure is agriculture under from the general public? Maybe not in South Dakota. I don't know. Sure is in Ontario. It sure is in Michigan. I talk there quite often. So, like, we are under the gun. Would you agree with that for the most part? Fertilizers, pesticides, it's all bad. Did you know it's all bad? So this is corn yields. Bob Nielsen is retired now. He was Purdue University's corn guy. And I stole this chart from him with his permission. Well, what do you see going on there? What do you notice? Sorry? What about back here? What was the yield increase back here? Nil, right? How much genetic improvement did corn make? This is open pollinated corn. How did you decide what corn seed you were going to grow the next year? How did you do that? Anybody? You took the biggest cob. I go to Zambia once in a while, and I work with farmers in Zambia, and they grow much lower population corn, and so they want big cobs, right? And I always say them, so like, you guys want cobs like this, right? Like you want them this long. You get a cob this long, that's the ones that you save the seed from. Well, guess what? Half the genetics came from a different plant, because corn is an obligate outcrosser, has to be wind-blown pollen, can't self-pollinate, so that great big cob could have been pollinated by a little wee thing like this. And so there was zero genetic gain. And what happened in 1935, give or take? Hybrid seed corn. Absolutely, hybrid seed corn. And so did that make a difference? Yep, made a difference. Then what happened about 1950, give or take? Yep, fertilizer. What else? Yeah. So if you look at this, and by the way, this is called the Green Revolution, right? If you hadn't heard of the Green Revolution, it was led by Norman Borlaug, a farmer out of Iowa, and it's really revolutionized the way that we farm. But when you look at this, genetics here changed the way that we farmed or the way that we gained yield, and that is basically 1 bushel per acre per year yield increase. And then pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers, like the agronomy, it happened about 1950, and it changed the slope of the line. So now we're at 2 bushel per acre per year. How many people would like GMO wheat? Think that'd be a good thing? Oh, come on, you guys are really quiet. I don't know, it has some potential. The other really interesting thing about this is that GMO corn didn't change the slope of the line. All it did was protect the yield that growers were already getting, that yield gain that growers were already getting. But what did this allow us to do? If we hadn't had the Green Revolution, would we be where we're at today? I should have put the other slide in. I forgot to put that other slide in. And the answer is no. So did you know, actually, I'll ask this question. How much more land do we farm today than we did in 1950? How many more acres? Does anybody know? 10%. We farm 10% more acres. How much has food production increased since 1950? It's 390%, right? We're almost 4 times the amount of food production on 10% of the land. And so without that, up until 1935, if population grew, you had to farm more acres. There was no alternative. After 1950, with modern genetics and modern inputs, now the population has gone up 2.5 times, and we've got more food than we ever had. In 1930, there was 1 person in 3 with food insecurity. Today, there's 1 in 10. So all of the things that you guys have done have really benefited society, and yet you get 0 credit for it. But when people, suggest that we're not doing a good job, that all of these things that we're doing have bad environmental consequences, do you guys even know this story? Can you tell them that we've increased food production basically 4 times on 10% of the land, 10% more land? And that 1 in 10 people are food insecure when 1 in 3 used to be. And that story needs to be told. Now be careful with that message, because nitrogen fertilizer brings along some unintended consequences. It really does, right? Because it creates nitrous oxide, it puts nitrate in the water, we get the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Those are all bad things. And we need to do something about those unintended consequences. But when the public only sees the unintended consequences and they don't hear about this part of the story, they get an unbalanced concept of what agriculture is all about. And I think we have done a crappy job as farmers of telling the general public this part of the story. They just take for granted that there'll be lots of food on the grocery shelves, which is a good thing, but they don't understand how we got there. So there's just a little bit of a place to start, because I just think it's a really important thing that we are not doing very well on, and we're like, from a sustainability standpoint, man, we are losing the narrative, and I think that's all bad. Anyway, so it's all about genetics and agronomy, right? So now I'm going to start trying to help you a little bit in terms of your mindset around how we farm before we get into dealing with residues and rotations and everything. It's all about genetics and agronomy. Agreed? That's what that slide said, isn't it? It's all about genetics and agronomy. It's exactly what that slide said. Johnson says. So this is Colorado State, Gonzalo Rizzo, some data from him. And the green bars are climate. You've heard about climate change? I'm from Ontario. That's like me saying I'm from California. Right? The Californians love the environment. So do the Ontarians, trust me. So, this is climate change. Half of our yield increase has come from the change in the climate. We've got genetics, we've got agronomy, but the climate is changing, and half of our yield increase actually comes from that. This one says that 39% comes from agronomy, 13% comes from genetics. If you look at a grander scheme of things, most studies would say that it's roughly half and half genetics, half agronomy. Maybe give the edge to the genetics, the breeders. I'm an agronomist. There's no way in heck I'm giving them the edge. Just not going to do it. So call it half and half. But anyway, this is just one study. So here's some things that like, are you getting higher yields now than you used to? Right? You're getting higher yields, and part of that is your management. But part of it is still the environment. And so I think from that perspective, there's some things that kind of play in terms of how you can apply that knowledge. And so this is one thing that I think is really interesting. Warmer temperatures. It's getting warmer, right? By the way, it's getting warmer. That is not a good thing when I go to Zambia, because they're already too hot. And so do not tweet out that Wheat Pete says climate change is a good thing, because it's 100% not. But for farmers in South Dakota, for farmers in Ontario, it actually is driving higher yields. And so, by the way, the other thing you cannot say to me, or you can, but I'll just shoot you down, is do not say, well, we will feed the world. Do you think my friend Abel in Zambia wants to be fed? He's a farmer. He wants to grow his own food. So this concept of feed the world needs food, no question. But those people have to be able to feed themselves. They don't want to be fed. So that's kind of a fallacy. Anyway, I find this really interesting. That's 2 degrees Fahrenheit. How did you guys miss the memo on metrics? How many square feet in an acre? 43,560. What kind of a number is that? You know how many square meters there is in a hectare? 10,000. It's a really simple number. What temperature does water boil at? 212. What kind of a number is that? In metric, it's 100. Everything's based on 10. Like, oh my gosh. Anyway, I will have to maybe, translate because some of you won't be able to do that. But a 2-degree Fahrenheit increase means almost a 2% increase in yield in soybeans. And that is because the optimum temperature for soybeans is 23, let me think about that, 68, that's about 75 Fahrenheit, right? And so if your average temperature through grain fill in soybeans isn't 75 degrees, then you'll get lower yields. And because we used to be below 75 degrees and the temperature has gone up a little bit, we get a little bit higher yield potential. And I think that's a really cool kind of thought process. What happens if it keeps warming and warming and warming, and now we hit the 23 and we're perfect, and then it goes to 25 or it goes to 28, then the yields tank, right? So there's this push and pull, but that says that for most of your warm season crops, that you are going to get higher yields. However, it also says for your cool season crops like wheat, temperature is going to kill you. The number one thing that kills wheat yields is temperatures, right? What's sort of the maximum temperature before you start losing wheat yield during grain fill in wheat? Do you know? If it goes over 77 degrees Fahrenheit during grain fill in a wheat crop, you will get less yield. And for every day through grain fill that you're over 77 degrees, you'll take 1 bushel less wheat yield per acre. It's really interesting. And this is not a wheat talk, but I could give one, I tell you. Anyway, so here's the other one. You know, carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is got lots of negative things. But man, increase in carbon dioxide, if you double the carbon dioxide, you get a 34% increase in soybean yield. You get about the same increase in wheat yield. In any of your C3 crops, they're carbon dioxide limited. And so as carbon dioxide levels go up, we actually get more yield. The other thing that's nice about increasing carbon dioxide levels for South Dakota, what's your most limiting factor most of the time? Water, 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 right? Water. Higher carbon dioxide levels makes you more drought resistant. Because with higher carbon dioxide levels, the stomata in the leaf can be closed, and the plant, when they open at night, there's more carbon dioxide in the air, more gets inside the leaf, the stomate closes in the day, but there's more carbon dioxide in the leaf so they can continue to photosynthesize even under drought. So for the mid-latitudes, for South Dakota, this is a good thing. Globally, it's a bad thing, but what that says is that you should be trying to manage for higher yields as these things happen because you've got higher yield potential. But here's the kicker, right? So this is some data, and essentially it's a genetic by environment, right? Genetic by environment interaction, and this is my yield gain, this is my yield environment. Notice that when you're at a low yield environment, your genetic gain is 0. And that's really interesting. So if you're in a low yield zone, all that new genetics isn't doing you any good. If you're in a high yield zone, you're way up here at, that's 40 kilograms per hectare, so that could be half a bushel per acre per year. And so this really drives you to say, boy, we got to be high yield growers. Because if I'm not a high yield grower, I'm never going to be a high yield grower. And you might ask why that is, and we're not 100% sure, but one of the things we wonder about is that where do you test genetics? On what fields or farms do you test genetics? always the best piece of dirt, right? Like it's always the high yield dirt. And if you're always looking for the highest yields on the highest, best performing piece of ground, then you're going to see that gain where you have no other limitation. If you want to get yield gains where there's other things limiting it, you got to actually test in low yield environments. And Pioneer and DeKalb, they aren't going to do that. They are not going to test in low yield environments because the variability goes up and they want better top end yield. So this is a really interesting thing. There's some things you can do as growers to try to make yourself up here. There really is some management you can apply. But yeah, that line is really quite interesting. Okay, so there's three things, right? There's three things that matter in agriculture. It's called sunlight, it's called carbon dioxide, it's called water. I talked about environment. Solar brightening. The sun is now brighter than it was, and Thijs Tollenaar, who worked out of University of Florida for a while, did this study, and he says that 27% of our yield increase across North America is due to brighter sunshine. We get more solar radiation. With more solar radiation, we get more yield. I've already talked about carbon dioxide. How much has carbon dioxide gone up in my lifetime? I'm an old guy. Huh? Almost double, not quite, Dwayne, but it's now at 415 parts per million. When I was born, it was 315 parts per million. So we've gone up. I'm not quite as maybe old as you, Dwayne. Anyway, so when you look at this, man, you'd say we've got lots more sunshine. We've got lots more carbon dioxide. So guess what? It's all about the water, right? It's just all about the water. And I know I'm talking in South Dakota and everybody is just saying, yep, like tell me something I didn't know. So here's, I think, where I'm going to twist your head a little bit sideways. This is the Indiana State Corn Yield Competition. It's a really interesting graph. So this is the average state yield, right? The statewide average. And this is the top yield growers, both irrigated and non-irrigated. So that says that the average grower, that yield gap is pretty big. The average grower could do a lot better, right? But look at the top two lines. What do you notice about the top two lines? Oh, come on. Yell it out. You got to yell it out. The non-irrigated is higher yield. Now, what sense does that make? Anybody? Why would that be? Because it's not 1 year. Look at, like it is consistently 10 or 20 bushel per acre higher yield, and they don't control the water. What is going on? More water than they need? I don't think so. I mean, if Indiana always had more water than they need, why would they irrigate anywhere? Sorry? Disease? They all come on, Ruth. If I am trying to be a high yield grower, baby, I am spraying for disease. I am treating my seed. Like I'm going for the gusto. Corn on corn on corn on corn? Most of these are not corn on corn on corn on corn. They are generally rotated. And I'd have to look at the data, but the thing to me, this is a hypothesis. I can't say for sure this is real, but Bob Nielsen kind of thinks this is what's going on. Where do I irrigate? What kind of soil do I irrigate? Sand soil. What's the organic matter level of sand soil? Low. How much biological activity is there in sand soil? Not very much, right? And so this probably is strictly to do to how alive the soil is. Organic matter, soil biology, carbon cycling, like intangibles that even with unlimited water, a sand farmer can't get. And that is really interesting. So there's more to this graph. I'm only going to show this part of this graph, but man, this is from the UK. And, you know, sometimes I wonder why that farm always out-yields this farm. Because they're side by side, they're the same soil type, they're getting the same moisture, I'm growing the same hybrids. This is from the UK, and if you go back to 1852, they started this experiment, and for 20 years in a row, they added about 15 ton per acre of dry cattle manure. 20 years in a row, and then they stopped. And so they haven't done anything on those plots since that. 20 years of manure, 15 ton per acre, they stopped. Oh, what happened there? Sorry, I must have hit a wrong button, my apologies. What do you notice about those lines? That happened back here. They stopped putting the manure on in 1871. How long did it take before those lines came together? It's 130 years. And I haven't seen the more recent data. I don't know if that's a blip, but this particular dot is higher because they were still applying the manure, and so that's a nitrogen factor. But here, they quit applying the manure, so that nitrogen component kind of kicked out, and from about here on, that's strictly an organic matter response. And it's the carbon cycling. You know, we talk lots about carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is not the holy grail. Everybody thinks it's, who wants to put carbon in the soil and hold it for 200 years? Does that do you any good as a farmer? And the answer is absolutely not. If you want something to really help you as a farmer, make that carbon work. And so carbon cycling becomes way more important. And this is carbon cycling. And 130 years that had an impact. Why is Farm A better than Farm B? Because back in, I don't know, 1945, they put more manure on Farm A. And it's still having an impact today. And you just kind of like, wow. By the way, higher yields beget higher yields. Why does that work? It's carbon cycling. And so these higher yields all the way along, they kept the carbon cycling more, and they just kept higher yields happening. So you want to make this thing work. Like this is just really, really cool stuff in my opinion. All right. So it's all about the water. How much water does it take? So I'll ask that question actually. How much water does it take to make a bushel of corn? How much water does it take? Okay. How much water does it take to make a bushel of wheat? More. You're right, more. How do you guys farm? If you don't know these numbers, how do you farm? Because I understand your soils are getting acid. I think there's a speaker on here later today, right, that's going to talk about soil acidification. What drives soil acidification? Nitrogen fertilizer. She's pretty easy answer. If you can't use your weather to predict your nitrogen applications, you're not going to be as efficient a farmer as you could be. And so we have to get better, by the way. We have to get better at reading solar radiation. This is not a wheat talk, but when I do wheat talks, we look at solar radiation because solar radiation at antithesis predicts yield. And so if I know my solar radiation in relative terms to other years in my area, right at anthesis, I can predict yield. If I can predict yield better, I can fine-tune my nitrogen rates better, right? You guys farm in a dry climate, you got to start looking at rainfall and actually knowing how that relates to how many bushels of corn you're going to get, or how many bushels of soybeans, sunflowers you're going to get, how many bushels of wheat you're going to get, because we have to start using that to predict our management better from a nitrogen standpoint. So this is Ontario data. We need about 2 million, and again, that's 1/10 of an inch. It's not quite, but it's about 1/10 of an inch. Interestingly enough, out of the yen program that we're running now, that's called Yield Enhancement Network in wheat, about 2.5 millimeters, or that actually is a full 1/10 of an inch, right? This is a little less. 2.5 millimeters is 1/10 of an inch of rain. There's 25 millimeters an inch of rain. So that's 1 bushel a week, 2.5. 2 millimeters, or you would get 12 bushels of corn out of an inch of water. Sort of where we're playing. So those numbers kind of become important, right? And I think we just have to get better at utilizing them. So I know you're all no-till, but boy, this erosion thing really does catch us. And I talked with Bo earlier, and he's a hoe drill guy just because of the amount of wind erosion that disc drills cause. I'm a disc drill guy because I'm in a wetter environment. But some of this data is it's old data, but man, like Iowa data, and they estimated they've lost 7 inches of topsoil in the last 150 years. I don't know about you guys, but where I come from in Ontario, we have exactly 6 inches of topsoil. If I lose 6.8 in 150 years, how much am I going to farm? Like those are huge numbers from an erosion standpoint. And yeah, it's a big deal. So we have to stop that, right? And I was really pleased to see all the residue. And I mean, part of this is thanks to Dwayne and Dakota Lakes Farms, and you guys are sort of the icon of stopping wind erosion. But man, oh man, this is Ontario. When we do tillage, we get brown snow. We, by the way, get a lot more snow than you do. You guys make a big deal about 2 or 3 inches of snow. Back home, we hardly even blink. They could just, oof. The interesting thing is if you look at what is in the soil that blows, so the field, when we soil test it, 3.2 organic matter, phosphorus is 11, potash is 80. When we take the soil that blew away, it's 3 times the amount of organic matter. It's 4 times the amount of phosphorus, and it's 2.5 times the amount of potash. So when that stuff goes, it's the best, right? So not only is wind erosion bad, it's taking the best stuff away. Of course, that's sort of, you guys are the choir there. This is just a great picture. I think David Laub actually took this one, if I recall correctly. And that's, what's causing that, by the way? You guys should know. What's causing that? Tillage, absolutely. 100% tillage erosion. So when you till, how productive are those knolls? And the answer is they aren't, right? And so tillage erosion is 10 times worse than wind and water combined. And that's kind of a number, again, that blows a lot of people's minds. It's really, really important. I just want to show you quickly, and then we'll get into a little bit more about why you guys need to keep wheat in the rotation. But this erosion cost yield. So this is an Ontario example. And we have a hydro tower line. That's what separates these two fields. And this farmer is in a good rotation, reduced tillage, trying to manage residue well. This guy is not. There's a few things you can see. And I'm not sure you can see it at the back, but boy, you can still see that I'm getting a bit of real erosion there. There's still a real coming. We get a lot of rainfall in the spring. That corn crop, we're going up and down the slope. That's a bad thing. There's a few things there. But you look over here and the amount of real erosion is really significant. There's some other things that are really interesting. If you look at that line, that is just a nice smooth line, right? And you come over here in the significant tillage, it kind of comes here and then there's a little dip. It actually goes down there. That's all the soil that the tillage erosion has pulled off that field. And you say, how much difference does it make? Which corn cob would you like? How much difference does it make? Like just astounding the amount of difference that causes. Now that's the worst case scenario. That's taking corn cobs from the worst eroded area versus the same spot over here. But it really has mega impacts. We'll skip that. So that brings us to about here. I think this is, I don't know if this is Dwayne on that four-wheeler or George.
Gosh, Mom.
You know, it just astounds me that that guy didn't break his neck. Like, holy Lord. Yep.
I don't think that was Dwayne. That was Dwayne on his bicycle a couple of years ago.
Oh, it was Dwayne on his pedal bike a couple of years ago. Did you take a tumble a couple of years ago, Dwayne?
Yeah,
kind of. Okay, I didn't know that. All right. Just before we carry on, any comments, questions? We're gonna shift gears now. I don't know. Maybe I've bored you to tears already, but yep.
There's one thing you just said about that solar radiation and antithesis. So, I mean, around here, a lot of mineral banding, and at that point, you know, you're talking about more nitrogen you can put on later, but isn't all that going to protein at that stage? And, I mean, doesn't the weather upsell then matter? Or, I mean, maybe just talk about that.
Yeah, so the question is around solar radiation at antithesis, and doesn't any nitrogen after that just go to protein? And does the weather before that matter? And the answer is for sure. The weather before that matters because there's I don't want to get too technical. It doesn't matter what crop you look at. You got to build a big plant. If you build a big plant, when you're in grain fill, a bunch of the stored carbohydrate reserves in that big plant translocate to the grain. It's called remobilization. Happens in all crops. So what happens up to that point matters. But if you have really good weather at antithesis, protein matters to you guys, right? So what happens is you use your rainfall, right? And you use your head count in wheat to predict what your second nitrogen application is. If you put all your nitrogen application on at one time up front, you have zero management potential left, and you will lower your soil pH long term. Because you're always going to be optimistic and fertilize for a high yield, and when you don't get the rainfall, you'll get a low yield, and that nitrogen that doesn't get utilized, it's going to increase your pH. So decrease your pH. My apologies. No, sorry. It's just sometimes the mouth gets ahead well, actually in my case, always the mouth is ahead of the brain. But so when you look at that antithesis, what you're really trying to do is you sort of set up for max yield with your second nitrogen application, right? And then the antithesis nitrogen, but you're doing that around second node. That's when you hit that second nitrogen application. And then at antithesis, you look at what your yield's actually going to be. And if you're going to have really high yields, what's going to do to protein? The answer is going to tank protein. What's the value of protein going to be? It's going to be high. And so we use the post-antithesis nitrogen to build that protein back and get paid for protein. But I will say that if you've starved your crop for nitrogen early, that post-antithesis nitrogen will still go partially to yield. It actually still will go to yield if you start, but you really don't want to starve the crop early if you can help it. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Cool. Anything else?
Yeah, I sort of have a question.
Yep.
Is there like a model that you could use or something that you could take on the precipitation and you have to see how much nitrogen you apply and whatever?
Yeah, so the question is there a model you can use based on precipitation to predict nitrogen? And the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because every area is different. And you basically have to build that model for your region. Plus, you got to know your subsoil moisture. If you're in the Dakotas, you got to know your subsoil moisture. But you have to know how that additional moisture impacts your final yields. And that's going to be different. I mean, in wheat, you should track solar radiation. You should do head counts in your wheat. You also actually have to track your temperature, because if you go high temperature, you reduce that yield potential. So when you build that model, it has to be based on your region. And we're getting now that we really understand the parameters pretty well, but there's no plug-in model that I'm aware of that you can use. And part of the reason is, on average, what is, by the way, the definition of average? Anybody know? Put your head in the oven and your feet in the freezer, and on average, you're comfortable. Right? So be very careful with averages. On average, an inch of rain gives me 7.5 bushels of wheat. All right? I have growers who only get 4 bushels out of an inch of rain on wheat. I have other growers that get 10 bushels out of an inch of wheat, out of an inch of rain on wheat, right? So you have to know where your management shakes out in that. But what's the theoretical maximum? How many bushels of wheat could you theoretically get out of 1 inch of rain? And the answer is 33. So we're at 7.5. That's a quarter of what we could get to, right? Like it's pretty sad. But when you say, is there a model, the answer is no, because there's a bunch of parameters you got to build for your operation and your part of the country. But like even just being aware of that can really improve how you might manage down the road. Once you understand those principles, you can apply them. Sorry, long-winded answer. That's just the way I am. Anybody else? Yep. Sorry. Oh.
Most of your Canadian wildfires reduce our solar radiation.
How much of our Canadian wildfires do reduce our solar radiation? Oh yeah, the damn Canadian sons of guns, like Jesus Murphys. Just so you know, the northern BC region is drier right now than we were a year ago, and we are predicting an even earlier start to the wildfire season in 2024 than we were in 2023. Now, there's still a fair chunk of winter to go, and that can change, and we sure hope it does, but right now it's not looking good. How much do we reduce solar radiation? It depends on how thick that cloud cover is, right? How thick that smoke cover is. And so there's no one answer. What's really interesting, because Ontario, we rarely have fires. We're a wet climate. We had forest fires this year, and we had smoke. We had smoke through June like crazy, right? And so everybody said the wheat yield, because that's grain fill for Ontario. June is grain fill for wheat. Everybody said the wheat yield's going to be low. We had our second highest wheat yield ever. Why? Pardon? Exactly. The smoke kept the temperature lower, and temperature limits wheat yield more than solar radiation. And so instead of having a 35-day grain fill period in wheat, with the smoke and the cooler temperatures, we got a 40-day grain fill in wheat. And those extra 5 days, you gain about 4 bushel per acre for every day of grain fill that you gain. That was 20 bushel. Maybe not quite, but in that range, right? So when you say, does it reduce solar radiation? Sure, but so does a cloudy day. And so the intensity of sunshine matters during critical phases, and mostly that's around antithesis. So pay attention to that. Cool. There was another question. Yep.
Okay, like, if you put too much nitrogen on for your weed, you put it all early. Okay, you're gonna carry some of that over to the next year. Carrying that over to the next year, is that what causes the pH?
Yeah, so the question is around why the pH goes down with excess nitrogen. And I think you have a speaker this afternoon, so I don't need to steal their thunder. The reality is, it's all about urea and the hydrogen ions that come along with urea. If you use 32%, it's 3/4 as bad as urea from a pH impact. And that's because 1/4 of that nitrogen is already nitrate. And so when you say what happens, I actually have a slide in here that if we get to it, I can show you. But again, you're going to have a speaker this afternoon on that. The reality is that for every 100 pounds per acre of nitrogen that you apply that the plant does not use, it will lower pH about 1/10, like about 0.1. And again, it depends. Is it clay? Is it sand? What's your buffer capacity? But it's fairly significant. Hey, here's another thought, just because I'm big on these kind of things that I think might help your management. If I take off a bushel of wheat at 12% nitrogen, or pardon me, 12% protein rather, how much nitrogen comes off that in that bushel? How do you manage your nitrogen if you don't know what you're taking off? Anyway, it's pretty simple. You know, what's the beauty of, and I mean, this is rough math, so if there's a researcher in the room, don't beat me up, because it's not scientifically exact. But protein is 1/6 nitrogen. Wheat is 60 pounds per bushel. The 6's cancel. So when you do that calculation, 12% protein wheat, every bushel has 1.2 pounds of nitrogen in it. 14% protein wheat, every bushel has 1.4 pounds of nitrogen. 10% wheat, it's 1 pound of nitrogen. So when you want to know how much nitrogen you took off the field, just look at your protein and your yield, and you can figure out exactly how much too much nitrogen you applied that particular year. It's a really simple calculation. Anyway, cool. Anything else? We'll move on. So let's just, I think there's a bunch of stuff that George wanted me to talk about that is kind of cool stuff. And this, you can't read this, I don't expect you to, but I pulled out because you're no-till guys, right? No-till, this is a meta-analysis. And so this is 5,463 comparisons across 610 studies. I expect they include quite a few of Dwayne's. No-till often reduces yields. And no-till association, that is not what you want to hear, right? It's not what you want to hear. No-till combined with residue retention and crop rotation, negative impacts are often minimized. And so if you guys go to strictly corn, soybean rotation, you are going to hurt. Long term, you will hurt. Full stop. And we've seen it too many times. Now, I know you don't grow many soybeans, and that's a good thing. You grow sunflowers, but if you can't get on top of the sunflower weevil, that's going to get tough, right? So there's some issues that come from that. But what this really says is that to make reduced tillage work, crop rotation becomes essential. And I'll just show you some data. This is, I show you some Ontario data, then I'm going to show you some data from the US as well around that, and maybe help you put into perspective a few of the myths that are out there. I find it really interesting. But this is a long-term rotation study. You know, it's got a bunch of different things in. It's been going since 1980. We have continuous corn, continuous alfalfa, corn and alfalfa, corn, soybeans, wheat, a whole bunch of stuff like that. And so the rotation effect on soybean yield, we go to corn, soybeans, there's our yields, right? We add wheat in the rotation, and one of the reasons George wanted me to come and speak is because you guys are starting to take wheat out of the rotation. And I drove up here this morning from Pierre, and man, until I got close to Gettysburg, I did not see hardly any wheat stubble at all. I give you guys full marks for the fact that I don't think I saw one field tilled. But I saw quite a few flowers, and you know, flowers don't leave much residue, and that's an issue. Nice bit of corn, so that's a good thing. But this wheat thing, and wheat. And I'll have a slide a little bit further on, but I think maybe it fits here too. You will hear and you will read that diversity is important. You know, it's less about diversity. Diversity matters, like the amount of different crops you have in the rotation matters. But you also have to select the right crops. Because you can have good diversity, but if you use soybeans and dry edible beans and lentils along with corn and maybe, I don't know, you could have a 4-crop diverse rotation with those crops and you would just beat the daylights out of your soil. It's not only diversity. In fact, probably what trumps diversity is having the right species in your crop rotation. And what's really interesting in all this data is that there's the spring cereals. Actually, you can pretty much tell if a crop is going to be good from a diversity standpoint, from a soil standpoint, or bad from a soil standpoint by looking at how fine and fibrous the root system is near the soil surface. You look at a wheat plant, you dig up wheat roots, and you got this mat of wheat roots near the soil surface. You dig up a sunflower plant, it's got a mat of roots right near the surface. You dig up a soybean plant, what do you got? Anybody grow soybeans here? A lot of soybeans here? Oh, don't tell. Do not get our disease. It's called soybeans.
It's getting worse.
So soybeans, by the way, they have no roots. Okay, I'm being a little facetious, but like they just don't have a root system. Edible beans don't have a root system. When you dig those roots up, they hardly exist. You want good soil impact, look for the crops. Wheat, barley, anything that has fine fibrous roots in the top mat, picking the right crops in that diversity has as much impact as diversity alone, full stop. And we don't always think about that. Adding another crop to the rotation is good. Well, yeah, it's good unless it's soybeans. And then adding another, seriously, every time you add soybeans to the rotation, your soil health indicators will go down. I don't have those slides in here. But every time you put soybeans in the rotation, you hurt your soil. And yet you make money. It stinks, right? Like it just stinks how that works. Anyway, so this is corn, soybeans versus as soon as I put wheat, that's red clover. That's wheat with red clover. You guys are way too dry. Do not try to grow red clover in your wheat crop here. I think it'll just beat you up. You got to have over 18 inches of rainfall consistently before you can put red clover in wheat and not beat yourself up, in my opinion. Ontario, by the way, gets 35 inches of rainfall a year. So tell me I know nothing, I'll agree. But like we're just so much wetter than you. Anyway, here is another study in Ontario. This is at Ridgetown, is a little bit different. But whether you're plow or you're no-till, as soon as I put wheat in the rotation, right? Put wheat in the rotation. And what's really interesting about this is as bad as soybeans are, there's soybeans wheat in the rotation, soybeans wheat in the rotation. And I just said soybeans are horrendous. But here I have corn, which is sort of just mediocre. I have soybeans and I have wheat. So I have wheat 1 year and 3. Here I have wheat 1 year and 2. And I don't actually like that because it's too close from a crop rotation standpoint. But it's really interesting how the more often I have cereals in the rotation, the higher my yields are for the corn crop and the soybean crop. And it's a really interesting outcome. It's very consistent in the data. So there's just a couple of, this is I think 2012, we had a severe drought in 2012. And that's soybean after the wheat crop, soybean after the corn crop. Which one would you rather have? Right? This is corn yield. And as soon as the more we put cereals in, this is oats and barley in the rotation as well. But you can just see that versus a corn-soybean rotation, interestingly, notice that corn after corn is always the lowest, right? As soon as you go to a continuous cropping system, you get the lowest possible yields. If you do the soil health parameters in a corn-soybean rotation are lower than the soil health parameters in corn on corn. And that's because corn has so much more residue than a soybean crop. So we get better soil health, we still get lower yields. You grow continuous wheat, you will have the best soil health scores you've ever seen in your life. What will the yields be like, Dwayne?
Not real well.
It'll be the worst yields you ever saw in your life, right? So be a little bit careful when we talk about soil health. We're still trying to figure that soil health thing out. So it just goes up. Again, corn after wheat, corn after soybean. It's very, very consistent that those results happen. This is the other interesting thing. As soon as you put wheat in the rotation, you get better nitrogen use efficiency. And that is astounding. But this is, maximum economic rates of nitrogen in corn, corn on soybeans, both 173. I put wheat in, I save 15 bushel. If I'm a no-till farmer, I've actually, 60 bushel, or 60 pounds. I need 60 pounds less nitrogen to get more corn yield. This isn't giving you yield, but there's about 5% more corn yield with 60 pounds less nitrogen. So this rotation stuff really makes a difference. Resiliency, there's lots of stuff that is pretty interesting about this. You guys ever get dry? You ever have drought? Right? Yeah, I know. I'm being a bit facetious, right, Dwayne? But so it becomes even more important for you. So when you look at this, and this is really hard to read, and I apologize for that, but this is essentially saying, if I compare to a continuous soybean situation, and I look across different weather conditions, and so I can have optimal weather, I can have cold and wet, I can have hot and dry. If I have corn-soybean rotation versus continuous soybean, I get a little bit of yield gain, right? These are just basically yield gain. As soon as I put wheat in the rotation and it's hot and dry, it's a 20% yield gain. Wheat in the rotation, 20% yield gain. A little bit less over here with reduced tillage, but I'm still much more resilient when I have wheat in the rotation than when I don't have wheat in the rotation. And so this is the same thing, only now it's versus corn, and we're looking at, or compared to continuous corn. Put wheat in the rotation versus corn-soybean rotation, no-till, I'm right, a 30% yield increase under drought conditions. Like, if that doesn't matter to a farmer in South Dakota, I'm not sure what does. And you're taking wheat out of the rotation, and I get why. It's the runt pig. It's not making as much money, but it has huge implications to the yield stability of the corn crop or the soybean crop that you're going to grow. And I think that's a big deal. So this is just looking at it again in terms of putting wheat in the rotation, and yeah, we've talked enough about that. So diversified rotations, and again, this says diversified, but I come back to it's not just diversity, it's having the right crops in the rotation, mitigated crop water stress resulting in trends of higher yields and higher soil organic carbon content. So what about US data? So I steal these slides from Dr. Amelie Godin. She is a researcher now at UC Davis, so University of California, Davis. But the researchers across the US have done this study. They have 11 long-term experiments. The only outlier is Colorado, and Colorado is under irrigation. And so in this data set, she pulled Colorado out because it responds differently. There's something weird about that site at Colorado. But you'll notice there is a South Dakota site. It's kind of on the other side of the state, so to speak. But Nebraska, a bunch over here. Ontario has 2. There's 347 site years of data there. So that maybe doesn't seem or doesn't resonate in your brain, but what it says is it's a massive stinking data set, just huge. When you look at that, when they increase the diversity, they reduce the risk of crop failure. And this is the graph. It's a little bit hard to understand, but the green bars are a complex rotation. The gray bars are a simple rotation. You want things to be on this side of the line. And when we look at South Dakota, it's statistically significant that that complex rotation will reduce your risk, or actually, it will increase the chances that you have a high yield and reduce the chance that you have a low yield. Michigan, that's amazing how much impact that has. So again, you look at in terms of the impact this has on your risk of low yield under drought conditions, it's massive. And the number one cause of crop loss from a crop insurance standpoint is drought. So that's all that chart says. In hot, dry years, diversification, including wheat is what that really should say, including wheat in the rotation of a corn, soybeans, and reduced tillage. So we need both wheat in the rotation and reduced tillage, increased yield by 7% for corn and 22% for soybeans. This trend is so significant that now there are the crop insurance underwriters in several states are now considering looking at your rotation and determining what premium you will pay for crop insurance based on whether or not you have wheat or a good crop rotation versus a poor crop rotation. Man, that would put some teeth into this, right? Like that I found that really interesting. We aren't doing that in Canada yet, even though we have the same data, but it just, if that has an impact on your crop insurance premiums, that will be a pretty interesting thing. But the data is clear. If you have a good rotation, the insurer pays out less often. And until this data came along, they didn't even realize that. They weren't putting that story together. So it's kind of a big deal. Okay, why is that? It's really interesting, you know. One thing that, and this is a really busy slide, but really what this diversification, including wheat, we increase infiltration, we get more water in the soil, we increase water storage. And there's a whole bunch of other things there that are good benefits, but we have a lot more trouble trying to validate that we're actually doing those. And at the end of the day, this is pretty cool, really busy stuff. Way too much information on the slide, but I stole it from Amelie. If I just have corn and soybean, my drought resistance is way down. If I put wheat in the rotation, that's the pink line, I go up. The other thing that they've seen is this one over here, and that's canopy temperature. And we have not talked much about canopy temperature, but if you want to predict whether you've got high yield or low yield, take your gun. They have these little infrared heat guns now, and just point it into your canopy and pull the trigger and see how hot it is inside your canopy. If your canopy temperature is is high, your yield is dropping. If your canopy temperature is low, you've got a much better chance at high yield. And yeah, what do I call high? So every crop is different. So with wheat, if that canopy temperature is over 77, it's too hot. With corn, if that canopy temperature is over 90, it's getting pretty, if it's over 95, it's too hot. And so when you look at the canopy temperature, you know, when I am in just my corn soybean rotation, even under irrigated conditions, so we irrigated it, right? We're in a poor crop rotation, guess what? The temperature is still pretty high. If we put it under drought, the temperature goes up very significant. If I'm in that good rotation, the green bars there, I add wheat, that is the pink bars, I keep my canopy temperature much cooler. And that matters. Question at the back. Whoa. What is the soybean max temperature? Gosh. I'm thinking, I got to do some, soybeans don't like it once it goes over about 32 Celsius. So that is 86, so about 90 Fahrenheit, I think. But actually, I'd have to look up to know for sure, right? Anything else? Is that at any phase? At any stage of growth? The answer is yes. That's at any stage of growth. Much more critical for wheat or corn within 2 weeks of anthesis. So for corn, within 2 weeks, either side of tassel, or with wheat, from about 10 days before it heads out till about 2 weeks after it heads out. Like, that's critical. With soybeans, that critical period is longer because wheat and corn flower once, soybeans flower over a much greater period of time, and that's why soybeans are a little bit more plastic, because they can lose a bunch of flowers early, and if conditions improve, they can set more pods later. But when you say, is it at any time of growth? Yes, because it'll affect crop growth rate, but most critical around that anthesis period. All right? Cool. Yeah, this is aggregate stability. That's the other thing that, how often do you talk about aggregate stability? Never, right? Like, nobody ever talks about it. It is incredibly important in terms of root growth, in terms of moisture movement, in terms of resistance to compaction. Aggregate stability is a huge factor. It's something that really improves with those fine fibrous roots in the soil surface. And this just happens to be the slake test, a pretty good indicator of aggregate stability. And you can see if you have continuous alfalfa, that water is not cloudy at all. If I'm in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation with red clover, that water is not cloudy at all. That's no-till. If I go to conventional tillage, notice how much more cloudy that water is versus the no-till, right? So tillage makes a big difference. Tillage destroys aggregate stability. Continuous corn, conventional tillage is one of the worst. But notice that corn, soybean rotation, even though rotation is supposed to be a good thing, we put those useless soybeans in there, and that is the cloudiest water, right? By the way, I should not beat up on soybeans so much because we don't plant winter wheat in Ontario if we don't put it behind soybeans. It's not quite true. We do put it behind oats a little bit, the few oats that we have, some edible beans, but the majority go behind soybeans. So, yeah. Anyway, so what's really interesting, you know, these short rotations, corn, soybean rotations, like the highest probability of low yields. The lowest probability of high yields. Do I need to go any farther? Like, you want to farm by putting a gun to your head and the Mother Nature gets to pull the trigger, I don't know, 1 year out of 3 or whatever that is? But that's what the data says. Lowest organic matter, reduced opportunity for cover crops, which doesn't really resonate with you guys, increased nitrogen requirement, and reduced profitability. It's really bizarre that that's how it works. And everybody wants to go there because soybeans are profitable and corn yields the most. But it's very short-sighted. Yeah, we covered that. And in this particular trial, when we put wheat and red clover in the rotation and did everything right, we actually got up to a 35% increase in soil organic matter, a 1/3 increase in soil organic matter over 30 years. It's rare we see that kind of change. That's unusual, but that particular study did. So overall, the wheat in rotation benefits is a 2 to 6% increase in corn yields, 9 to 14 in soybeans. It's a range, I apologize, but that's just the way it works. It's about 0.2% increase in organic matter, more water, more nutrients. You guys aren't going to sell residues. And then the question becomes, what does crop insurance do with that? Right? And that gets us to about here. And not one of you tweet out that Wheat Pete says you should drink and drive. All right. How am I doing for time? Cool. Any questions or comments about that? I know I'm a data guy and I threw a lot of data at you, but I think it's really important that you understand that. Yep. Yeah, so the question is, how do you get farmers to grow more wheat? It's simple, increase the price. The other thing that would really help is if we could get better genetic yield gains in wheat. One of the problems with wheat, like relative to corn, what is the investment in wheat genetic breeding? Like in variety development. It's about 10% of what they put into corn. And so if we could get better genetics, because genetics helps drive it, if we could get heat tolerance into wheat, the number one thing that kills wheat yields is heat. If we could get heat tolerant wheat, then that would help. We do, by the way, have drought tolerant wheat coming on. So there's a company in Brazil, or Argentina, I think Brazil, Ceres, that has put a sunflower gene into wheat. It's called the HB4 gene, and that confers drought resistance to wheat. So when you say, how do we get there? If you can imagine this, they're starting in the Ohio program. It's called H2O Ohio, I think. They are paying growers to grow wheat because of this data. So I'm not a big government should pay guy. I'm really not. But when you say how do we get more growers, I don't know. It's got to be economical, right? Bo, you had a question?
You said increase the price of wheat. A couple years ago, you could have had $10 wheat for a whole year. But people still forgot to sell it.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with price.
Okay, so Bo says it's nothing to do with price because wheat was at $10 a bushel, and how many people sold their whole wheat crop at $10 a bushel and forward contracted at that? And I'm a farmer as well. I wish I'd have sold more $10 wheat. Damn. Anyway, it's hard to always pull the trigger at the top or know when to pull the trigger. So, but it'd have to be more profitable then. How's that? Yep.
One thing that I'd like you to mention is because with the wheat is you get your soil armor, and it's hard to get that. I mean, that's a lot of what keeps your soil cool, stop evaporation is the soil armor. So the big benefit of wheat in this area is protecting the soil.
Yeah, so the comment is that the big benefit on wheat is protecting the soil. And it's 100% right. Wheat just, because you're growing it in narrower rows than you are corn and soybeans, because there's lots of residue there. By the way, you want better soil armor, you use stripper heads. And I think that's actually what we go to next. like stripper heads. How many people use stripper heads here, by the way? Oh, good, so it can be quite a few. What's really interesting about stripper heads, like we all talk about the height of the residue and trapping snow, right? The reason we want this is to trap snow. The data actually does not support that. There's some really good data out of Saskatchewan that says most of the additional snow you trap goes off in temperatures like this as it sublimates away. So that extra snow you think you caught, on average, you actually get about 1/3 of that moisture into the ground. 2/3 of it just disappears. What's more important is the fact, and this goes to how high do you leave your corn residue, how high do you leave your sunflower residue. The biggest impact is how much it reduces evaporation the following spring. And the taller the stubble is, the lower the wind speed. Wind speed drives evaporation. So does temperature. You can't do as much about temperature, but you get that tall stubble so that the wind speed at ground level is almost zero, and you can cut your evaporative losses to really, really low. And that has actually more impact than trapping the snow. So your comment's 100% right. Like wheat just builds this soil armor, and that soil armor reduces evaporative losses, which is incredibly important in a dry climate.
I'm gonna make a comment, it's gonna be political, okay? So if the NRCS would take the money they plant for cover crop in central South Dakota and take it towards paying someone to play it with weed, it really change this environment, because they don't hesitate at all about planting cover crops that really don't work in this area. They'll give you a payment, so why don't they give you a payment for weed?
Yeah, so the comment is around NRCS and payments for cover crops versus
$10 versus 70.
sorry, ton.
Well, we'll pay for wheat $10 to $12 an acre. For diversifying your crop rotation.
Okay.
That's on average, but
Yeah.
you couldn't have planted wheat in the last 5 years. But yes, cover crop will pay now up to $70 an acre.
Yeah, so $70 an acre for cover crop, $10 an acre if you put wheat in, or maybe 12 to diversify rotation. You know, what's really interesting, is Ohio a wet climate or a dry climate? Come on, they're like Ontario, right? They get 30 plus inches of rain. We're swimming, most springs we're swimming. They had a dry spring, and anywhere they grew cover crops, they significantly reduced their yield because they lost moisture on an unusually dry spring. It didn't rain from the 4th of May till the 4th of July, till Independence Day, and that's when they got rain. And the cover crops hurt them. You know, living roots are good, cover crops are good, building organic matter is good. You know the best way to build organic matter? Have a massive cash crop. Especially a massive cash crop of wheat, because of all the good things that wheat does in the soil. And in many climates, and it's really you kind of have this push-pull like crazy, because I want you to have more organic matter. That organic matter really does help. And the only way to get more organic matter is to have more biomass to create it. And so that we want to grow cover crops because they should add to the biomass. Well, you know, in dry climates, oftentimes the cover crop uses the moisture that the cash crop would have used, and so the cover crop sometimes does not increase the actual total amount of biomass going back into the soil. So is it a good thing to have green cover crops to protect your soil from the wind over winter? Absolutely. But if it means you take 20 bushel less wheat or 20 bushel less corn, it's of less benefit than you would think it would be, because that really good crop is still doing good things for the soil. So I'm not in politics. I have no idea what your programs are. The two of you can duke it out about what's right and what's wrong. It's all good. At the end of the day, I'm a wheat guy. I want you to grow great wheat crops, right? And if I'm also a cover crop guy, but I know the limitations of cover crops. And in dry climates, it's way tougher to make them work. It just is. Yep.
A lot of your studies were like a three-crop rotation plan. Have you done anything with like wheat, corn, bean, corn, flour, make them and wheat out, but still have wheat within the rotation?
So the question is, have we done anything, because most of our studies have been like corn, soybeans, wheat. Have we done anything with adding a fourth crop in there, like sunflowers? And so yeah, the South Dakota data actually has sunflowers in there as a fourth crop. And sunflowers as a fourth crop improve the situation.
I'm saying like taking your wheat out for like a fifth and sixth year versus.
So if you take, it's pretty clear. The question is just take your wheat out so it's only 1 year and 6, or 5, or 4. So it's pretty clear from that data though, where we had soybean wheat. Remember I showed your soybean wheat, so we got to wheat 1 and 2, and even though that's an alternation, not a crop rotation, it's still one of the best because of how frequent wheat is in the rotation. The more you take the good crops that help build that soil, the further you put them apart, the less benefit they are. Now, adding sunflowers, so if you put, your real question is, if I go corn, soybean, wheat, how does that compare to corn, soybean, wheat? And I'll tell you right now, it sucks. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to use that terminology. It stinks, right? Like it will be poor because soybeans are hard on the soil, corn is just mediocre, and wheat is good. If I move it out to 1 year and 5, my benefits are reduced. I can't tell you exactly by how much, but they are definitely reduced. Anything else?
On your corn, or on your soybean, spring wheat, one, you had.
It was winter wheat.
Soybeans, huh?
It was soybean winter wheat,
Okay.
soybean winter wheat, but
What
yeah.
were the winter wheat yields? You only showed the soybean yields there. The winter wheat yields, were they going down at all?
So in my soybean winter wheat alternation, what happened to the wheat yields? They were holding steady.
Okay.
But long term, I think you shoot yourself in the foot because we'll get soybean cyst nematode, we'll get fusarium crown rot. I'm surprised we haven't seen that show up yet. I really think you need 3 crops in the rotation. I am not trying to promote a soybean wheat rotation, even though the data says it's okay. Just not good for me, right? Was there another hand or yep?
What do you think what's the leading cause of climate change?
Oh, Lord help us. If you think I'm going down that road, you are off your stinking rocker. No, whoa. Okay, back up. Whoa, stop. Carbon dioxide increasing is a good thing from a crop productivity standpoint for the cooler latitudes. If you were farming in Mexico, even though carbon dioxide going up is going to increase your yield, make you more drought tolerant, it's also increasing the temperature and you're already too hot. And so for the farmer in Mexico, increased carbon dioxide is a net negative. For the farmer in South Dakota, for the farmer in Ontario, because we are cooler climates to begin with, carbon dioxide is a net positive. But when you say what's causing it, worldwide what's causing it, who cares? Like, I know. Yeah, and so the focus is on cutting back carbon dioxide, and you know the easiest way to cut back on carbon dioxide emissions is not electric vehicles. Because electric vehicles have a huge cost in terms of the environment in building the electric vehicles. Dealing with the batteries that go south is another negative. You really want to change that, in my opinion, and this is only my opinion, and I'm not a politician and I'm not an expert, but all the data I look at, we need less vehicles on the road. That's what drives it. I don't care so much, are they electric, I mean, electric is better from a carbon dioxide emissions for sure, but I still have other impacts, so there's unintended consequences to electric. Just get less vehicles on the road. Which, by the way, says I should not be standing here in person giving this presentation. I should be on the screen, because that would be a benefit. I hate doing virtual presentations. They stink. Way rather see your faces. But like I'm not going past that. That's just my opinion. We'll drive on. Anything else? That is not political. Yeah.
Just back to all the smoke we had this spring. Is the carbon dioxide in the air is it quite a lot higher, or doesn't that really make much difference?
No. So the carbon dioxide from the forest fires would maybe increase, but very, very marginal. What's more important is the particulate matter in the air at that point in time, right? And so if you have really heavy smoke early in wheat growth, you can reduce head size. So smoke can be a negative, but it's rare that you would have enough smoke to really be a negative. And it gets pretty technical, right? I don't mean to go down that. Yep.
Just a little comment. You've been talking about everybody taking wheat out of their rotations, and I just wanted to mention that 3 days ago, the USDA announced that South Dakota has more winter wheat planted than last year. So yay.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you didn't hear that, good for you guys. You planted more winter wheat in the fall of 2023 than you did in previous years. So, yeehaw, the price of wheat will go down again. Sorry, it's just.
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Yep. What do you want me to talk about in the last 7 minutes, George? Is there anything in particular?
Let's get into a little bit of wheat fertility. Thoughts on that, like copper, chloride, sulfur.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Back up one more. Come on. There we go. Darren, you just thought you'd like to see. I sure hope that is not me on the drive home to catch my flight up here. Lord. Okay, so here's just some, everybody always is looking for the silver bullet. And one thing I want to tell you is that when it comes to agriculture, we have yet to find the silver bullet. And you want to be a better farmer? Focus on the basics. And this is, again, I always have too much data. This is Ontario data. I could show you a very similar study from Minnesota. Giles Randall there found the exact same thing. What we did was we took some different sites. We had 4 different sites. They had very low initial soil fertility, phosphorus and potash, very low. We took low phosphorus and potash, and then we broadcast a whole bunch, and we built that phosphorus and potash into the moderate range. Not too excessive, just to the moderate, right? And so when we did that, we said, okay, and we call that base fertility. And does base fertility matter? Does your background fertility matter? And so what you'll notice, I don't know what the next slide looks like. No, it's not. So what you'll notice here is no fertilizer, low P&K. My corn yield was 155 bushels per acre. Man, if I powered it to it, and I put on 270 pounds per acre of a 628-28 as a starter, I gained 30 bushels per acre, right? 30 bushels per acre. But notice that if I had built my soil fertility up and I put no fertilizer on, I still out-yielded the very best I could do on a low fertility soil. I still got a nice yield bump, 9 bushel out of that starter fertility, but I said there were some management things you could do to make yourself a high yield grower as opposed to a low yield grower. This is one of the keys. And if you are farming fields that are low fertility and you have an income tax problem, you are a poor farmer, because you should hide that money in the soil in phosphorus and potash. Now, you guys are mostly farming high potash soils. And so on a high potash soil, you don't need to build that soil fertility anymore. You probably need a little bit of potash in the starter, just because under really dry springs, all of that potash you have in the soil gets trapped in the clay, and so it's not available, and you'll still get a little yield bump out of some starter potash. But man, this says build your soil test to the medium range. And if you build your soil test to the medium range, then you automatically, without doing anything else, every year, not just 1 year, every year, you will get 10 bushels more wheat, you will get 5 bushels more soybeans, and you will get 13 bushel more corn. And that happens every year. And so from a fertility standpoint, you know, you're all trying to cut costs, I get that, but when you have a good year, you hide that money from the government in building that residual soil fertility, and it will make you a more profitable farmer down the road. And once you get to the medium level, you just maintain it. You don't need to go higher. I have some slides here that just kind of say exactly what I just said, right? That we cannot do any better than no starter under low soil test with high P and K. The same thing is true. Where are we? Oh, that's the same. That's just pointing out the yield differences. Oh, and this is where I get into what happens with I don't know what black it out. Yeah, it does. Good, cool. So what other nutrients you want me to talk about, George, or did I use my 7 minutes up there?
No, you're fine. One of the questions that got brought up is a lot more guys started looking to substitute milo in instead of wheat. What's your thought of that?
So milo is more like corn than it is like wheat. It's better than corn probably, but if you substitute milo in because you're a dry climate, that's going to be better than soybeans in the rotation for sure, but I doubt it has as much benefit as corn, because it's more fibrous root than corn, but it's not as fibrous as wheat. So my guess is that it's somewhere in between. And it's just 100% guess. I have not seen the data, all right, from that perspective. By the way, this P and K stuff that I just talked about, you know, there's lots of new phosphorus products coming out. And they'll tell you all about how they make that phosphorus more available. Man, I think that, we'll just skip that. Oh yeah. So this is really what it's about, right? A pound of P is a pound of P, no matter how you P it. And so if you're paying more per pound of phosphorus for a fancy product, you're probably not going to get benefit. At least you're not going to get benefit out of it until you get your soils built up into that medium phosphorus level. Because that drives more profit than making phosphorus more available, which even that is really questionable, whether you can make phosphorus more available. You know, people can argue with me about that. We'll have that discussion. But I will guarantee that there's more profit to be made to just buy MAP or DAP or whatever the cheapest source of phosphorus is and getting your soil tests built up into that medium range than there is trying to make profit out of 1 year by a more efficient phosphorus product. Like that's a slam dunk in my opinion. Yep.
In a no-till situation, to raise your P levels up, you broadcasting that or?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. In a no-till situation, how do I build my phosphorus levels up? And so it's really where I love strip-till corn. Because strip-till corn, I know it's not no-till, but now I can put that fertility in the ground, right? I'm going to put a big shot of phosphorus, maybe in South Dakota I go 4 inches deep. I don't go 4 inches deep in Ontario because we know it doesn't work as well for us that deep. But in a dry climate, would I put it 4 inches deep? I'd try it for sure. Do I broadcast it? If that's the only option I have, the answer is yes. But it's the poorest option, right? If I could figure out a way, but I don't want to put it on and go moldboard plow it in, for crying out loud. That's a recipe for disaster. But putting it on with a strip till, trying to get it in the ground is a better system. Or put it on with your wheat in mid-row banders. If you go to mid-row band phosphorus, you could put a whack of phosphorus on. You'd actually kill your field efficiency with the drill because you'd be putting so much phosphorus on. But mid-row band, you can put a lot and not cause injury because it's not close to the seed, right? So I'd put it in the ground if I could at all. Cool.
Couple more questions.
Nothing else? Boy, I really put you to sleep. What's
your thoughts on biologicals? It's a hot topic.
What's my thoughts on biologicals? Yeah. Some biologicals work. Anybody here grow soybeans? What do you have to do the first year you grow soybeans? Inoculate. That's a biological. Does it work? 10,000%. Yeah, like, in fact, probably in your climate, your second year soybeans out-yield your first year soybeans because you put the rhizobium there and they've multiplied, right? So some biologicals work. There's very few biologicals that work consistently. Soybean rhizobium is one. We now have some seed treatments for soybean cyst nematode and sudden death syndrome. They're biologicals, they work. They're about half as good or 60% as good as a synthetic chemical for soybean cyst or for sudden death. So do they work? Yes. Are they at the same level? No. But at least they're consistent. Man, when you get into a lot of the other things, like you look at nitrogen fixation, so I don't care if it's Invita or it's Utricia or it's Pruven rather from Pivot Bio, they are anything but consistent. Can you see them work once in a while? Absolutely. We just try to figure out when they work, what did we do different to make them work? So biologicals, try them. But consistent response, don't forget that there is the equivalent of 70 humans in biological weight on every acre, right? And so you're trying to take, I don't know, a few grams of a biological, and you're trying to trump the impact of 70 humans in that soil. That is a really tough proposition. So I'm not opposed to them. Try them, but make sure you do the trials, because we have to find the ones that consistently give us yield increase. Otherwise, why would we do it? And it's really hard. The reason soybean rhizobium work is because there's nothing native in the soil that they compete with. There's no other bacterium in the soil that infects the soybean root. So you put them on in the soil, they've got no competition. Man, you put some of these other things in the soil and they've got competition from adapted bacteria, adapted fungi, out the yin-yang. And trying to trump that is really hard. So It's maybe not the answer you wanted, George, but that's what the data says, right? Cool.
Cool with that. Any other questions, guys?
Well, if not, thank you very much for having me. It's nice to come to a place of the world, a part of the world where wheat used to matter. Hopefully after my talk, it matters a little more again. Have a great 2024, everybody.